Now, to build or not to build? That is the question.
Yes, Labour leader Sir Keir Starmer this week threw his weight behind solving the housing crisis, saying a Labour government would not only build 1.5 million new homes, but would also introduce new rules to allow housing developers to bypass objections from the locals.
Sir Keir said he wants to help people realise the dream of home ownership, and when asked if he considers himself a YIMBY, yes in my backyard, he said yes.
But is the Labour leader right to want to build more houses on the Greenbelt, or could it have a devastating effect on our beloved countryside?
Well, we're joined now by Deputy Editor of Conservative Home, Henry Hill, and the Chairman of the Community Planning Alliance, Rosie Pearson. Both of you, thank you for joining us. Henry, surely building affordable housing in town centres and on brownfield sites is the way to help young people onto the housing ladder rather than concreting over the Greenbelt.
The Greenbelt is a really misleading term because I think people think it always means beautiful fields, areas of outstanding natural beauty. It doesn't. It's literally an area that Labour drew around cities in the 1940s to stop them growing. So there's loads of areas which are actually kind of derelict or scrapyards, and you see photos of them all the time. And areas like that, we need towns to expand. Yes, building more in city centres is brilliant. The Tories should have done that a long time ago because they have a lot more incentive to do that than Labour do. But towns and cities grow over time. Our population is vastly bigger than it was after the war, and it's absurd that our urban footprint hasn't been able to catch up.
So many of my constituents say those bits of land, yes, if they're not the green belt and it's not properly protected, but what about the infrastructure? What about the doctors? What about the schools? What about the gas, electricity? What is it that is stopping those areas being built on?
Well, I mean, partly because it is the green belt. I think that's the point. The green belt does not just apply to beautiful countryside. It's a term that applies to
exceptional circumstances.
No. There's
exceptional circumstances there.
There's loads of land which has green belt protection, and it's very difficult. We have a planning system which allows people to object at any stage. Politicians can randomly call it in, local council all the way up to the Secretary of State. It makes it very, very expensive. Now, yes, you could bulldoze through housing if you had the political will, but the political will hasn't been there, and as a result, we're now 4 million houses short of where we need to be, according to Centre for Cities, and we're seeing that not only in house prices being extortionate, but the rent crisis in our cities.
Well, we'll ask about that a little bit later. Who are those people who need the houses?
Let's bring in Rosie Pearson, the Chairman of the Community Planning Alliance. Rosie, thanks for joining us. We've obviously got a housing shortage in the country. Keir Starmer says we're going to have to stand up and ignore the NIMBYs, and we're going to if we're going to build the number of houses that we need, people are struggling to get on the housing ladder because there aren't enough houses. Keir Starmer's got a point, hasn't he?
Well, I mean, the first thing is you were talking a few minutes ago about niceties in emails, and Sir Keir this week has forgotten niceties, hasn't he? He's talking about bulldozing communities, he's talking about blockers, ignoring communities, NIMBYs. It's all divisive and it's all a distraction from what actually matters, which is to build, essentially what we need is to ensure that everybody has a safe roof over their heads and that we live within our environmental needs. No one's talking about that. It's always build, build, build. It's about chipping away at the green belt. There's actually another thing to do with the green belt is to say, look, that the green belt should grow as population grows. It's public good. It's there to give green space and breathing space to people in cities. So what we need is a proper, sensible, evidence-based review of green belts. We don't need this constant rhetoric about blockers and NIMBYs. That doesn't help at all.
Well, the thing is, Rosie, whenever a housing development's proposed, there'll always be a group of people who say, no, I'm objecting to this, I don't want to see this, and because it might affect their view, or it might affect, fear it might affect their house price or whatever. And so if forever local objections are carrying so much weight with the local authority, then we're never going to build the houses that we need. That's the point that Keir Starmer's making, I think.
I think that the issue is that, firstly, the right kind of houses aren't being built. They are always unaffordable, they're always out of reach of people in the local area that see these estates going up outside their villages. That the infrastructure isn't provided, as we've heard already, and the system forces people to become objectors. It doesn't plan with communities, planning is done to communities. So what we need is local plans at the very beginning to involve communities so that they can have a say in their own future. So stop portraying normal people, normal residents as blockers and saying they have to be bulldozed over. Involve them in their future. And I think we need to start thinking, let's embrace communities, embrace nature, and you can have everything. You can have a safe roof for everyone over their head, the environment, and you can have a prosperous future with natural capital at the centre of it. So I just think the whole debate is so divisive. Calling people NIMBYs doesn't help anyone at all, and we need to have a proper evidence-based debate. Things like the housing targets that people throw around, they're not based on evidence. People in different parties pluck them out of thin air. The standard formula that councils have to use at the moment to work out how many houses they've built is based on out-of-date figures. So we just need to go back to evidence and ratchet down the rhetoric.
Rosie Pearson, thank you. Henry, has she got a point there? Plucking figures out the air, building on places you don't need to?
No. The housing targets are only arbitrary in that they are too low. They are far lower than the number we would actually need to build to solve the housing crisis. They're calculated at roughly what politicians think they might be able to get away with.
But do you think they're changing rapidly because of the number of people coming into the country? We had 600,000 people. Is that the issue, the number of people entering the country? Because put it this way, Keir Starmer's targets wouldn't even last 2 years at the moment. So are we talking we need 1 million houses to be built a year? That's many cities that were built each year.
We need 450,000 to be built a year in order to solve the housing crisis within 20 years. And, yeah, high immigration absolutely doesn't help. But this is a problem that goes back decades, and people have seen it coming since the 1970s. The simple fact is we have a growing population, and we have choked off our cities. And that means that instead of expanding into, some fields, which no one really uses, we have more pressure on urban green space, no parks, no gardens. It's terrible, and we need to fix it.
Henry Hill, thank you very much indeed. Let us know what you think about that. Email us gbviews@gbnews.com.